Welcome back to the Mental Health Matchmaker podcast. I'm your host, Brooke, and today I'm joined by Brie, a registered social worker based in Guelph who brings honesty and energy and a whole lot of heart to the conversation. In this episode, we talked about embracing the full spectrum of emotions and why they exist for a reason. And we also talked about neurodivergence, co-regulation, and what it means to be seen in relationships. I had so much fun recording this episode, and I know you're going to love it as much as I did. So let's get into it. All right, Brie, so happy to have you here. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Of course.
I want to start by asking you about what types of clients come to see you for support in therapy.
I work with folks from a variety of backgrounds. It seems like lately, I'm saying this like it's some big coincidence. It's not a coincidence because I also have tailored myself to this, but a lot of the folks I've been working with lately are neurodivergent in some way. I have a particular interest in working with autism and ADHD. So a lot of folks, especially those who didn't know those things when they were children, later diagnosed and undiagnosed folks. And then also a lot with personality disorders, specifically borderline personality disorder, because those seem to have a connection as well. I think a lot of folks who have that label of borderline personality disorder, there's a lot of other things that can be going on at the same time. And B, I think a lot of those folks, ADHD and autism can be a part of that or can influence, their other mental health symptoms. So I've been seeing that lately with the intersection between being neurodivergent and also having mental health concerns. Specifically, BPD shows up a lot.
That is so interesting that there's an overlap there. I have heard a little bit about that before. But yeah.
I think it's a mix of things. I think that I may have explained this in other settings, but a big thing that we think contributes to the development of borderline personality disorder is the invalidating environment. We have, maybe an already more sensitive child or a child with more difficulty regulating their emotions in the first place for whatever reason. And if we place them in an invalidating environment where those emotions aren't being taken seriously and or aren't being recognized as being as powerful as they are. So that can be something like abuse, but it can also be an environment where your needs just aren't recognized. Where the other people around you are maybe just a little more stoic and they're a little bit better at kind of keeping it together. And the kid grows up feeling what's wrong with me? And that can really, really contribute to a lot of the patterns we see in borderline personality disorder. What is a more invalidating environment than not knowing that you have a disability?
Yeah, absolutely.
If I am a kid with lots of energy and I can't sit still and I can't focus on the things that I need to, I'm going to get a lot more negative feedback. I'm going to have people saying, why aren't you trying harder? If I'm growing up with inconsistency, inability to focus and follow through on things I'm saying, I'm going to get a lot more negative feedback. The impulsivity with some of these things can make it more difficult to regulate emotions, which might make you come across as more sensitive. So I think in that circumstance, it's that just makes the perfect environment for it to show up. And then on top of that, I also think we have a lot of folks who, I don't want to say misdiagnosed, although that certainly does happen because as a social worker, that's not really my game. But I do have some folks where I think the first thing that's picked up on, let's say, are the mental health symptoms, when that's not necessarily the first thing causing the experience.
That's why therapy is so effective, because we have this space where we can dig deeper and not just see what's on the surface, but we can actually get curious, what is driving the behavior.
Yeah.
And not feel ashamed of how we're showing up.
Yeah. And I think the school system is getting a little bit better at incorporating some of that from what I hear. I mean, it's been a long time since I was in grade school. From what I hear, there's more about, emotional regulation and awareness being included in education, which I think is so, so important. I do think that it is hard on the family level to do that type of work, especially if parents aren't equipped with the same information. And that's where I was about to call it the neurodivergent movement, but that's, I think, maybe a little extreme. But with my learning about neurodivergence over the past little while, that's where I see kind of the difference is even when I talk to my parents, and I have formal diagnoses,
Right.
even when I talk to my parents, there's a little bit of hesitancy of like, that's just normal kid stuff. Like everybody does that. Everybody functions that way. And I'm like, I think we need to broaden that understanding because it led me to feel when I was a kid, like I had to like hide certain parts of myself or certain things were like misbehaving even when I didn't have control over them.
When I was in high school, that's when I became really aware that there were like very specific ways I needed things to be explained in order for me to grasp them.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked at my report card, it was really interesting how certain subjects I'd be like top of the class and others I'd be completely at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like very confused about how I could be both of those things, getting both of those grades.
And that's kind of part of the experience. There's a lot of, well, first of all, everybody is different, right? Everybody has that different range of skills. And even if you don't fit into a category that we call neurodivergent, even if you don't have ADHD or autism or these things, I still think that everybody has their unique ways that their brain works. And that part of what I love about this turn towards neurodiversity, let's call it, is that it does recognize that everybody's brain is different and that accommodating learning has to happen on a broader level. The other part of that is that with your brain processing information differently, you're going to have certain areas where you have strengths and certain areas where you don't. And it's going to seem really kind of almost cognitive dissonancy of like, I have 2 university degrees. I'm a pretty accomplished, intelligent person. I can't go to the grocery store. I have to get my partner to do all my groceries because I will have like a meltdown if I go into the grocery store because there's fluorescent lights.
Right.
I've accomplished 2 university degrees, but I cannot get my groceries. And it's frustrating. And there's this kind of tension there of like, I know that there's things that I'm really, really capable of. And then in other ways, I just feel so incapable.
Right.
And that's what a lot of people are talking about in therapy right now is like, it's just hard to be alive. And I think when we get to adulthood, we find that a lot of us are struggling with really basic things. Like as I said, I've accomplished a lot in my life, but like showering, doing the groceries, brushing my teeth, remembering to eat. These are things that quote unquote shouldn't be that difficult. And yet they are.
Yes, they are. The remembering to eat thing. Huge. Everyday struggle for me.
Mm-hmm. I trick myself sometimes because I get stuck up in my head and I'm ruminating and I'm trying to intellectualize and I'm like, why does it feel this way? And like, why can I never find a sense of safety? And it's a constant pattern of triggers. And then I'll like eat a meal or take a shower or get a really good sleep and wake up the next morning and suddenly it feels not perfect, but better, a little more okay. And it's, I think because when we're not meeting our basic needs, the body's setting off alarms, right? When I'm dehydrated, when I haven't eaten in like 12 hours, my body literally thinks I'm dying. Because I don't know if you know, we need food and water to survive. And that's actually like our most based instincts are around staying alive. And so when I am in those states where those basic needs aren't being met, my brain thinks I'm dying. My brain is sending out messages to the rest of me that we got to go into fight or flight. We've got to organize. We've got to find food. There's a threat. There's a reason. And my brain's going to find a reason why I'm feeling unsafe. And that's where the spiraling happens is I'm trying to intellectualize a reason why I don't feel well. And that very act of ruminating takes me out of my body. Mm-hmm. I cannot recognize the hunger cues or whatever it is and fail to meet the need. And then I'm stuck in this spiral.
Yes.
So if I'm able to slow that down, take a moment to be with my body and figure out what it is I need, usually just eating a snack or doing something to meet that basic need will actually reduce those thoughts. We like to think that our thoughts are like these conscious things that we choose. which sometimes that can be the case. But a lot of the times our thoughts are kind of coming into our head to explain the world around us that we're already feeling. So if I already feel unsafe, I'm going to worry. If I already feel threatened, I'm going to be hypervigilant for that threat. If I meet the basic need, those thoughts aren't necessary anymore, and my brain doesn't produce as much of them.
I think that's such an important reminder because we also live in a world where we are like bombarded with all these new techniques and these new trends, like these
Mhm.
health wellness trends. Like it directs our focus outward at all these flashy things. And it is easy then to forget that we have to look inwards and check with the basics. Like let's check with the basics of food and water and sleep.
Yeah. And for some people, I think that can be extra hard. Like for me, I struggle with interoception. So feeling the things inside me. I, if you've ever had a question, a therapist ask you, where do you feel that in your body? I don't know. Everywhere in my soul, in my skin.
What
I
does that
can't.
even mean?
Yes. And so I have found it's a little easier to focus on certain areas. So when I have someone who, like me, struggles to recognize where they're feeling pain or what hunger or any of those things, it's helpful to kind of point a light in a direction. So I'll say, well, do you notice anything in your stomach? Do you notice anything in your shoulders? And we'll kind of go through bit by bit like that to cultivate that awareness. And for me, it's always going to be more difficult than it might be for someone who is a little bit better with that interoception. And that's part of that sensory motor difference that I have.
Yeah.
Um, so it can be a little bit more work with folks who struggle with that to develop that awareness.
Right. And then I imagine that you are able to provide some different coping strategies.
A lot of the time, the coping strategies are literally just eating and drinking,
Yeah.
sleeping, and
So
spending
fair.
time. Spending time with people is another big one.
Okay.
I think that a lot of the education that I do, this is going to be another commentary on society piece, because in addition to having all of these fancy miracle cures that are being advertised that are going to like fix your mental health, a lot of those suggestions are very individual. And even if we look at what therapy is, it's about learning to control your thoughts. It's not about that. I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
Learning to control your thoughts, learning to regulate your emotions, learning to kind of minimize your negative impact on other people, which is important. And this is a spiel that I go to all the time with my clients. We are born with the structures and the capacity intact to like freak out emotionally. Babies know how to scream and cry. That is how they get their needs met. We are not necessarily born with the capacity to regulate. That is something that we develop and build over time. It's a skill that we have to kind of learn. The structures are there, but we have to strengthen them. We have to learn them. And we learn them by bonding with other humans and having those other humans show up for us, help us to regulate, and then we learn what it feels like. There's an element of co-regulation that you'll hear about in some therapies where our nervous systems are actually talking to each other. So if you had come in this morning all scattered, all upset, all over the place, and then I walk in and I'm, more calm, more collected, just that, you'll notice when someone comes into the room who's a little calmer, who like has a grasp on things, you can kind of a little, because your two nervous systems are communicating.
Mm-hmm.
And when a community does that consistently over time, your body, not your brain, your body learns how to regulate. It's a lot harder to just figure that out on your own.
Yeah.
Without having a community and having others to co-regulate with you and show you what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
It is a lot harder to do it independently. And we're actually pretty wired for connection too. Even like I'm a pretty introverted person. I need a lot of time to myself. I very much enjoy alone time. And I still, when I'm stressed, when I'm melting down, when I'm kind of like at my worst, just being around another human, especially if they're a trusted human, helps me to feel safer.
Yeah, that deeply resonates. Growing up as like, I was gonna say the world's most anxious child. I obviously wasn't, but it felt like that. And I feel like now as an adult, I'm really unlearning a lot of stuff that I was taught. But now having more awareness, going to therapy and having a space and like someone to witness me being like, this is what's going on in my head. And then seeing in friendships that I've cultivated and these beautiful, lovely humans that I'm lucky enough to be surrounded by now, and relearning as an adult what co-regulation is, what it looks like. And some of my friends also go to therapy, so we do the reframing stuff, but it doesn't always need to be like that. I noticed that there's value just in being witnessed.
Yeah. I went through the hardest time of my life. It was a terrible breakup after a 10-year relationship. And I had bonded so much with this person that it was really hard. And we had lived together for so long. And I moved around as a kid a lot. So this was the longest I had ever been in one place with one person ever. And a lot of like feelings of unsafety came up for me when that ended. It was really, really hard, to the point where it was hard for me to eat. I wasn't sleeping properly. And as much as I forget to eat, I am also an eater. I like to snack if food tastes good. Like I'm never going to say no to something that I enjoy. Yeah. I was not eating. So for me to not have an appetite at all, like
tells you a lot.
It was a lot. And I had more than one friend at the time, but I had one friend who really stepped up, and we spent every single day that summer together. And sometimes it wasn't fun. I was not a fun person at the time. I was very like easily crying, and I was very cynical and like miserable about things. But I just like would go run her errands with her, or would help her walk the dog, or sometimes I would just sit in her backyard and she'd wake up and have her coffee and I would just sit there silently. But just being with another person who she was not she was very non-judgmental towards me. This was the first, because we had been together for 10 years, it was the first real breakup I went through as an adult. So in my 30s, I was experiencing things that most people experience when they're like 18, 19, their like first big breakup. And so I was very like all over the place, and she was just very understanding, and she didn't have anything to fix it. She didn't really have much to say other than just to sit there and listen to me tell the same stories over and over again, and listen to me cry, and just accept that.
Yeah, just be with you in your current state.
Yeah. And I had a lot of people telling me that, not in such harsh terms, but essentially that I just needed to move on, and that I needed to pick myself up and dust myself off and like move forward and not get over it. That was kind of the vibe underneath.
The underlying message.
And there was none of that with her. She was like, this is going to feel terrible. This is going to be, I remember my first breakup. I felt like I was going to die. So now to go through that after 10 years with someone, of course you feel like you're going to die.
Yeah.
And just accepting that. And that was the co-regulation that I needed. It wasn't some fancy skill. And so when I'm working with clients and we're talking about like what work do I do with them, sometimes it doesn't feel like work. I'm just sitting there and not judging.
That's like such a beautiful message. It takes me back to this time where I had my most difficult moment in Australia, and I had this one friend, sounds similar to your friend. I remember feeling the same way, where I was like, I have full awareness that I am not pleasant to be around right now. I didn't feel like I had much to contribute in the realm of joy or happiness. I felt just like I couldn't escape these difficult emotions that I was feeling. And she never asked me to change. And I think that is so special now that I actually think about it.
Yeah.
That is a powerful message. The importance of just allowing ourselves to be seen by someone and not feeling like we have to present our best self, or like we have to earn being in the company of another.
Yes.
And that we have to show up as our best self, that we can be accepted in this way, not asked to change, and we're still deserving of that company.
And that's beautiful. That's like a core belief, right? Is that even when I'm not okay, I'm okay.
And I need to get that tattooed like across my forehead.
Just post-it notes all over.
And I just see it in the mirror every day.
I have one client right now who's going through some grief, and they said something that I have just been thinking about and think is really profound and wonderful. And it's a reframe on the phrase of misery loves company.
Okay.
We kind of, whenever I've heard that phrase, it's like, oh, if you're around a miserable person, they'll drag you down, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've reframed it as misery loves company, as in misery loves to be around other people who've experienced misery, because to know that grief is to make space for that, right? And so this person's been finding themselves wanting to spend time with friends who are also going through hard things because they understand, but not really wanting to spend time with the friends that are doing really well right now, because it's a little overwhelming to be around all these bubbly, happy people when I just feel ugh.
Yeah.
So they find themselves gravitating towards people who have been through hard things like they have, and who maybe are going through hard things like they are. And that feels more comfortable and more safe.
Mm.
And I think that's a really interesting take on this idea that misery loves company. It's not that when I'm unwell, I want to drag people down. I just want someone to meet me where I'm at.
Yeah. You want to feel seen
Mm-hmm.
and understood.
And it's not that you can't feel happiness, especially, when you're around me, but it's like, at least acknowledge that I might not be feeling happiness,
Yeah.
and that like both can exist. And so I just thought that was really lovely, because in the worst times of my life and in the worst times of my clients' lives, it's the people who really step up and support us and make us feel safe.
You said the words make space. And I've been meaning to ask a therapist this question because I feel like holding space is like this line that's used a lot. I love it because I get it and it makes so much sense to me and I can visualize what holding space looks like. And I read in your bio that you mentioned something about embracing the full spectrum of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what does it mean to hold space or embrace the full spectrum of emotions in a therapy session?
In a therapy session, I think it kind of depends where the person's coming from, but I think a lot of us have this tendency with our emotions to try and push them away or suppress them, or not accept them, or think that they're incorrect or invalid. I have a lot of times where people are saying, I shouldn't be feeling this way. And I think that comes from a noble place. Like, if I am upset with my partner that I live with, like I'm angry and I'm like wearing it, I might have an inclination to suppress and push that away, because it's going to cause conflict and it's not comfortable, and maybe it's not fair to the other person. Maybe a part of me realizes that what I'm upset about doesn't make logical sense. That doesn't mean the emotion doesn't make sense. So making space or holding space for those emotions involves allowing ourselves to feel the thing, and then maybe getting curious about, where it's coming from and what to do about it and all of that. But if our knee-jerk reaction is to push the emotion away, unfortunately, they get bigger.
Totally.
The point of our emotions, and I'm saying this like I know everything, but the point of one of the functions of our emotions is that they give us messages. And so when I'm angry, that might be my body giving me a message that something is getting in the way, or some goal is not working out for me, or a boundary has been crossed, or that somebody has treated me in a way that I don't deserve to be treated. Those are situations where anger shows up. If I start to suppress anger, I stop being able to recognize when people have crossed my boundaries. And that very quickly puts me in unsafe situations. Obviously, I don't want to be living in a place where I'm feeling that anger all the time, because it's uncomfortable and unsustainable for my body. Mm. When we do that work of making space and saying, okay, this emotion is here. It's here. It's valid just because it exists. I cannot undo the emotion for you. Let's figure out where to go with it. And just allowing yourself to feel it.
Yeah.
Which, it all sounds so easy. I'm kind of repeating myself because I'm trying to find a way to like make it tangible and like tell you how, when there isn't really necessarily a how.
Mm-hmm.
But that making space means that you have permission to feel however you feel about a situation, even if that doesn't make logical sense to you or doesn't seem to fit with your values. So, a value for me is compassion. So, I sometimes struggle to feel anger because that, on the face of it, doesn't feel very compassionate with the person.
Right.
But that anger has a place and has a purpose and demands to be explored. That doesn't mean that I'm going to go acting on that anger every time. I'm not going to like start throwing stuff around the room or like start taking it out on other people. And sometimes we need to do some skills to rein that in. But having the anger is not bad.
Mm-hmm.
And listening to what it is telling me can help me to make important changes.
Yes, it is feedback.
Mm-hmm.
It's information.
Yes.
I had this visual of like the knock at the door and it just getting louder and louder and louder until you just open the door.
Yes.
And I've had moments in therapy where I go in and making space literally just looks like me starting to talk about something and my therapist noticing there's a lot of emotion behind that in maybe the way that I'm like starting to get a little heated and her just pausing me and saying like there's something there, let's just sit with it.
I get a little sassy sometimes if folks are. I said that I hear the thing about I shouldn't be feeling this way. My favorite question is, should you?
Yeah.
Shouldn't you? Like, that person just crossed a boundary. That thing happened that was a last minute change to a very important plan. You didn't get any sleep last night and you forgot to eat this morning. Shouldn't you be a little irritable? And just, it's kind of a humorous take on this tendency that we have to invalidate ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not saying that it is okay for you to treat people poorly, but whatever emotion is coming up for you has to be okay. Because if certain emotions are off limits, then you're missing a lot of key information from your body and from your brain.
And I imagine that the more we continue to miss that information, the more we slowly and gradually create this disconnect, which brings me back to your point of anger being important information. And if we were to continue over time to ignore and ignore and ignore, that it could land us in unsafe situations.
Yes. Yeah. And this is how folks end up in toxic or exploitative relationships. This is how folks end up burning out at work. This is a lot of how that happens. It can even damage like friendships and family relationships where all of a sudden you find yourself just completely disconnected from this person and not really knowing why.
Like, how did I get here?
And how did I get to this place where I don't really trust people, or the opposite, where maybe I trust people too easily, actually, is probably more often what we see. But our emotions, they are sometimes warnings to us and notifications and communications to us. And it's important to be able to listen to those. Sometimes our body gives us false alarms. Like, sometimes I'm just, walking down the street and I feel like I'm being chased by a lion, and that's not fact. And so sometimes there is that work. But it's still important to feel and recognize and check in with. If I get to the point where I'm never feeling anxiety and I'm always pushing it away, again, I'm going to be missing information.
Right. And that anxiety can also serve us at times too.
It keeps us safe.
Yes.
Almost all of our emotions in some way, shape, or form keep us, or can help to keep us safe. Every system in our body evolved because it was the best at keeping us alive. That doesn't mean it's perfect. And with the brain in particular, I feel the need to make the distinction between alive and happy. Our brain will keep us alive, but not necessarily happy. Every system is oriented to do some sort of life-saving function. Digesting, circulation, breathing, even the capacity to see and hear things. These are systems that evolved because they helped keep organisms alive. Our emotions are very much the same way. They are alerting us to things in the environment that we might not be consciously aware of. If I had to be consciously aware of everything in my environment all the time, I would just explode, I think. think that's just too
Even the
much.
thought of that makes me want to explode right now.
It's exhausting.
It's a lot.
Yes, especially in our current day and age where there's like so much on people's plates. If I had to be mindfully aware of everything, it just would not work. And so we naturally tune certain things out. And the emotions help us to cue into important things, recognizing threats and maybe feeling fear, recognizing something important in the future and maybe feeling nervousness that will motivate us to prepare for that thing, recognizing safety and connection, and then developing a sense of love for the people around us. All of this helps us to survive. Mm-hmm. And when we start viewing our emotions as helpful things, even when they're uncomfortable, even when they show up at times when we didn't invite them, the reason our emotions exist is to help us. And when you start to do that work and to recognize that, it makes it a lot, I don't want to say easier, but a lot more manageable to sit with the discomfort of things.
I think it also allows us to not demonize an emotion like anger or anxiety, which, you know, if we're feeling that, then it feels like it's a part of us. And so then in turn, if we're demonizing it, we're also demonizing a part of us the time too.
I heard someone speak about loving your inner critic and responding with kindness to your inner bully and having compassion for your lack of compassion. And I think that's really, really interesting. And it's kind of helped me a little bit because I struggle with the self-compassion part of things.
Me too.
And learning to have compassion for the lack of compassion is a really interesting first step.
Yeah, we're getting abstract here.
Yes. And this is what I love about therapy. Because these are conversations that we don't necessarily have in other spaces is, okay, so when I get set off by something and it puts me in a sour mood and I'm getting cranky and irritable with my partner, maybe I'm going to feel a lot of shame and frustration about that because I'm like, oh, he's such a nice guy. Like, he doesn't deserve this. Why am I acting this way? What if I slow down to say, okay, what is this frustration trying to do for me? Like, why is this? And not in an intellectual way, because I always want to go to the intellect.
It's so hard not to.
But really feeling the emotion and identifying what the urge is associated with it. And not necessarily following through, although sometimes that is the answer. But just listening to what the emotion is telling us. Because sometimes that frustration might be, well, I felt invalidated by my partner. And so this frustration is me like sticking up for myself a little bit. Or I felt unheard by my partner. And so this frustration is getting me to stay with the problem and make sure that I'm heard. Like I said, we don't always have to like listen to what the emotion is telling us, but hearing it, trying to, I was going to say make space again, accept it.
I was also going to say hold space.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Like, it's just kind of like allowing it into the room and just letting it be there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's not taking necessarily any action.
Exactly.
It just letting it exist.
And sometimes maybe getting curious. Sometimes just letting it exist.
Yeah, sometimes just crying or yelling into a pillow or just sitting there and feeling miserable.
Letting it pass through. Yeah. Even. I feel like time is flying by because this conversation is so excellent. And I think we could probably go for like maybe 4 more hours, especially given we also might miss our potty cues and forget some meals. So I did want to ask you what you would say to someone who's on the fence about booking into therapy.
I think a lot of people talk about how therapy can be a scary thing, and that is true. I also just think it can be overwhelming if you don't know what to expect, or if you've had negative experiences in therapy before, or if you are worried that it won't like work for you. I have sort of more comforting advice and maybe less comforting advice. The more comforting advice is that you don't have to find the perfect person with the perfect training, with oodles of experience in a specific thing that you're looking for. What research shows makes therapy most effective is the connection between the therapist and the person. And so if you're, let's say, doing a consultation call and you just feel a little more comfortable talking to them, and you feel like you could trust this person. Maybe not right away, but you feel like you could get along with and trust with this person. That's it. That's the magic. That is the work. That trust that you're feeling is
Yes.
what we need to develop. And so that is, for all the perfectionists out there, sort of a good sign that, like, you don't need to find the perfect one. It really can just be a conversation, and the therapist will take it from there. We're the ones that have the roadmap. You essentially just have to show up and trust us.
I love that.
The less encouraging part of it is that sometimes it is a little bit of trial and error. With trial and error, like I said, that human connection, that's the strongest piece to look for.
You're located in Guelph,
Mhm.
and they can book in with you virtually as well.
Yeah, I have in-person days on Thursdays and Saturdays. I'm available online throughout most of the week. I really love to talk to people. So even if folks have questions, but they're not sure that they want to meet necessarily with me, I have also helped folks to, like, match them up with the right therapist in the practice or help them find other things. So if there's hesitancy there, like, do not be afraid to reach out, because I'm happy to help in any way I can, whether that ends up with me or with a different therapist.
I love that. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your wisdom. I can't wait for everyone to hear.